You're listening to Vitally Nourished. This is your space to challenge the way modern wellness talks about women's health. I'm Shaylin Kathleen, your host, a registered holistic nutritionist and women's health mentor, supporting women who are done fighting their bodies and are ready to feel more energized, regulated, and at home within themselves. This is where vitality becomes not something you chase, but something you cultivate. If you're craving a calmer, more regenerative relationship with your body, you're in the right place. And if something resonates, I'd love for you to stay connected, whether that's listening along, sharing the episode, or leaving a review. Now settle in and let's begin. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast. So I've been a little radio silent and I apologize for that. But if you're following me on social media, you know that there's been a lot going on in the last couple months. We had some medical emergencies and a death in the family in December, and it was a very busy month with my job. For those who don't know, I currently still hold a full-time job. I do live in one of the most expensive cities in Canada, and although I love making this content and I love helping and supporting women in their health journey and their wellness journey, it just doesn't pay the bills right now. And that's just the reality of it. And I think that it's worthy to remember that if you have a pursuit or a passion pursuit or something like that, or if you want to start a business or whatever it may be, like you might have to kind of juggle things for a while and the trajectory might not go exactly how you plan. And I think this really applies to life and applies to this day's episode. Sometimes you have to do multiple things at once. Sometimes you have to deprioritize something in order to prioritize something else. Today's episode, we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about a few things and we'll kind of get into it. But I wanted to start with the opener line of what you do in private shows in public. Or maybe you've heard what you eat in private, you wear in public. I've seen this a lot with January resets, which I think a lot of us are kind of over this idea of, I think society has kind of come to a point where a lot of people have realized that maybe that's not very sustainable. And we know now, end of January, early February, that this is where a lot of people are falling off the wagon. And if this is you, I just want to give you permission to not feel bad about it. You don't need to feel bad about that. It's okay. It's actually very biologically appropriate that you are not able to hold and sustain new goals right now. And this episode is not going to be about how to push harder or how to push your goals or how to level up or optimize or reset or any of that. This is going to be about how to unfold organically. But first, I want to unpack that phrase of what you do in private shows in public. So I think people use this a lot and kind of feel like it's a good motivational thing on the surface. Some people use it who are really proud of their accomplishments and they kind of use it as their own sort of yeah, I did this kind of prompt. And I think that's fair enough. You know, if you accomplish something, then yeah, you should be proud of that for sure. But whenever I see this phrase, and I've seen it pop up a lot, I don't know if it's like the January thing or whatever, but there's a lot of deeper nuance to this phrase of what you eat in private, you wear in public, or what you do in private shows in public. Let's get a little deeper into that. No judgment if you've used this phrase before. This is not meant to be like a call out on you, but I do think that we should explore the language we're using and the words we're using a little bit deeper, because these are the things that kind of set up our neurobiology, right? It sets up the way that we think about ourselves, the way we think about the world, and then the way we show up in the world and the way we show up in our bodies. So the first thing that I really notice with this phrase is that it is truly rooted in shame. And it's rooted in diet culture. It immediately conjures the idea that there's an ideal type of body or an ideal type of person. And it also places that ideal at the whim of society. So it's saying what you do privately, the public sees, and the value of the opinion of the public is better than the value of your own opinion. So we should be more worried about the public perception or the societal perception of ourselves and our bodies and how we show up in the world than our own perception of it. And that is my biggest sticky point with this phrase that I keep seeing, is it places the onus of your value as a person into somebody else's hands and somebody else's control. And we've seen this so much, especially with women's bodies. We are now sliding back into that like skinny phase. The skinny era is back. It's like the culture wants us to be on this constant hamster wheel of always being so fixated on how our bodies look, how our bodies are perceived, how we are perceived, how we look, that we never actually get to drop into our own body and be in our body and have that experience of what does this feel like without placing societal value on my own experience. What does it feel like to just be in my body because I want to be there versus trying to force my body to fit a certain mold? Whether that's, losing a bunch of weight and being a Pilates princess, or if that's being a muscle mommy in the gym, or like whatever it looks like, whatever that goal is that is within your social sphere. Is that goal actually yours? And does it feel good in your body when you show up for that? Or is that a societal pressure, like I need to fit into this mold? And I think this also somewhat preys upon the, neurobiology of the human, where we do actually want to be part of a tribe or a community or a group of people. We're naturally hardwired to form into groups. And so when we feel isolated or like we do not belong in the group, whatever that dominant social culture is that you perceive, and social media is really bad for this because, the algorithm and the things that you look at will become more and more, and it'll show you more and more of this thing. And if that thing is not aligned with you, or if that thing makes you feel small or shamed or not good enough, or like you don't like stack up, then that's going to make this perception that you do not belong, even though that's not accurate and it's not true. That's just based on social media. But it's kind of hardwired into our brains on a subconscious level that we seek belonging and we seek sameness. And when we are seeking that from a group that doesn't actually align with our values, it creates this kind of disharmony within your body where you're going to always feel like you're maybe not measuring up, but you're not perhaps looking at the right social circle or the right social context, right? So I do think within this whole conversation, it is really important to find your people, the people who see you for who you are, who see the light inside of you, who see you for your personality and your values and just who you are. They're not bothered and they're not looking at your body and being like, oh, does her body fit with my idea of what is good and acceptable? If you are around people like that who are making a lot of assumptions or a lot of judgments about you based on your body, those are not your people. So moving on with that little tangent there, with this phrase of you are in public, what you do in private, what you eat in private, you wear in public, those phrases. Moving on with that, it also has the practical problem of making assumptions about people based on social image. So like I just kind of touched on how social image is formed in our minds, it also has this societal standard of like, if you're in a bigger body, then surely you must eat very badly and sit around all day. But we know, and if you follow me on social media or if you've been paying attention to any of my content, I talk about this all the time. Your body image or the way your body looks, the presentation that your body is taking doesn't inherently or directly represent your health or your vitality. So you can be carrying more body fat, but you could also be carrying more muscle. And so, yeah, you take up more space. But just because you take up more space doesn't mean that you are inherently unhealthy, because body composition is what is going to direct and dictate your metabolic health. So, I always talk about building muscle mass and focusing on muscle mass and, working on your endurance and different things like that. But it's not in the sense of like you need to lose weight per se. It's about changing the structure. And so this episode, we're going to kind of walk along the lines of body composition and fat loss. And I usually don't talk about fat loss because for me, fat loss is very much a secondary focus. And I'm very conscious of people who have struggled with their weight in their lives. Like I have struggled with my weight throughout my life. I have cycled the same 70 pounds two different times. And previously in my life, when I lost weight, I did it in very unhealthy ways. And that's not something that I want to feel in my body. And it's not something that I want people to feel like oh, to be healthy, I need to lose this weight. Instead of looking at it that way, let's look at how can we change our structure. But before we dive into that, I have one more point about how this phrase just doesn't work for me. And it has to do with people with invisible conditions. We're not acknowledging people with autoimmunity, neurodivergence, all of these things that you cannot actually see on the surface. And so the way that person presents in a social setting may be a particular way because that's how they've adapted to survive or keep themselves comfortable within a social context that feels hostile. And who they actually are in private is, this beautiful human being, but that beauty of that human being can't always translate into the social setting because that social setting is not safe for them. And I think this is very important that we all recognize that social messaging can put a lot of pressure on people, and that pressure creates a lot of discomfort and disease. So we need to kind of look at people on the human level. And I know sometimes that's hard. I always, every single day, have to practice non-judgment at some point in my day. I always come up against some sort of friction in my day where I get annoyed with somebody or something happens. And I allow myself to feel that anger and that frustration. But then I also take a step back and I practice non-judgment. And I think that's very important because doing that practice on other people allows you to do that practice on yourself because we are our own worst critics. So before we get a little bit into the most common New Year goal for people, I want to once again reiterate what we want to focus on rather than just looking at weight loss or fat loss is body composition. Okay, so that's the first thing to think about. And having goals and working towards self-improvement is amazing, but you need to do it from your own internal place. You need to do it for yourself and not for society or the judgment of other people. And hopefully you have people in your life who are your people and they support you no matter where you're falling on the spectrum of body shape. So you can probably guess that one of the most common goals, one of the most common New Year resolutions is weight loss or fitness in general, but a lot of people, over 50% of the global population, based on the most recent surveys that I could find, over 50% of the global population is trying to lose weight. That is literally billions of people. And you very well may be one of them. You might be somebody who's like, well, I want to lose weight. And now I'm feeling a little confused because you're telling me to not focus on weight loss and focus on body composition. But if I lose weight, that'll make me healthier, right? Won't it? Shouldn't it? So we're going to walk this fine line between the desire to lose weight, rejecting diet culture, what body composition actually means and why it matters, and where fat loss or weight loss comes into the picture. Like, when do you actually focus on fat loss or weight loss? And I'm going to give you the short answer right now. When you focus on fat loss or weight loss is at the very end. There are a whole bunch of other pieces that you need to have in place if you want to lose weight, lose fat, and have it be sustainable and something that you keep off for the rest of your life. Because I'm sure you've heard the statistic that over 75% of people who lose weight gain it back, if not double, right? So you don't want to be that statistic. And if you're listening to this episode and you have lost weight through traditional methods and you've kept it off and you've built a healthy lifestyle, I'm very happy for you. That's amazing. And congratulations, that's awesome. So this is not about you then. This is about the other 75% of people who struggle with that. And another thing that I want you to kind of hold in your mind in this episode is, what does weight loss actually mean? Like, what does that mean? If I could wave a magic wand and be like, presto, you're in your perfect dream body, but you have the exact same thoughts, the exact same emotional state, and the exact same habits that you currently have, would you be able to maintain that new body? And probably, if we're being honest, the answer is no. You wouldn't have the self-confidence, you maybe wouldn't have the self-belief, you wouldn't have the habits that you need, and you would slowly fall back into the things that brought you to the place that you're in. Or perhaps your environment would remain the same, and that environment is driving fat gain for you, driving weight gain for whatever reason. Because I think we all know that chronic stress and chronically elevated cortisol does make it much more difficult to lose weight. And a lot of us living in these times are dealing with chronic stress. If I waved that magic wand and presto, you had your perfect physique, the problem with this is that your body seeks homeostasis. And if you just have the body, but you don't have the pattern, then your body is going to slip back into your normal patterns. So if your normal pattern is to be very sedentary or to go to McDonald's every day, 5 times a day, or you're not nourishing your body with like actual nutrients and you're eating a lot of processed foods, then yeah, you're going to slip back into those patterns because that's what's comfortable, that's what works for you, that's what you're used to, whatever story you have around that. One thing that people tend to overlook is the story that we tell ourselves about our bodies and about the food that we eat and about the choices that we make and about how much energy we have and about our ability and our capacity, all of these things. And some people will call those excuses. I don't think they're excuses. I think they're survival mechanisms. They're survival mechanisms that allow your body to feel safe because for whatever reason, those are the mechanisms that you have turned to compensate for something else. And only you know what that thing is. I can't tell you that because I don't know you. But I hope if you're listening, you can kind of see what I'm saying, that, oh yeah, I do have a story around my ability to exercise, or I do have a story around how I feed myself. There's a lot of different stories that are at play, and sometimes they're very subconscious. So digging those up is going to be part of your journey and a very important part of your journey. So what happens is that your output needs to match your capacity. And what people start trying to do in January or whenever they decide that they want to go on a health journey, the most common thing is that you're going to cut your calories and you're going to exercise. You're going to go to the gym. You're going to eat less and you're going to move more. And if you're going from a sedentary state and you're suddenly doing this, it can be very, very jarring on the nervous system and on the body. And over time, if you are eating in chronic calorie restriction, it's going to downregulate your metabolism, and that sends a stress signal to the body to conserve energy. This is also where cortisol will come to play because you're going to be under chronic stress from being underfed. And so it's going to make it even more difficult to A, lose the weight, B, have energy to show up for this new practice that you're doing, and C, to maintain it. A lot of people who do manage to lose the weight and keep it off through calorie restriction end up having to deal with many health consequences at the later end of that journey, whether it's losing your period, becoming infertile, having gallstones. There's a lot of different things that can happen as a side effect of calorie restriction. So I've shared in other podcast episodes about my journey, but when I was at my lowest weight, I was my most unhealthy. I had lost all my vibrancy, all my energy. I was so depleted. I didn't have very good mental health at all, and I hated my body. So there's also this piece of just because you lose the weight or you change your body doesn't mean that your emotional state will change. Doesn't mean that the way you feel about your body will change. So I have been exploring a different path, and one that so far is giving me good results. And I want to offer this path to you if you want to change your body, but you don't want to feel restricted. You want to get healthier and maybe lose some weight, but you don't want to feel like you're fighting. You don't want to feel like you're in a constant battle against food and against your body and against your energy. We want to feel good about ourselves. We want to feel good about our body in our routines. And most weight loss regimes create friction, resistance, and frustration. They create a more complicated relationship with food a lot of the time, especially if you're trying to follow the rules perfectly. Maybe you're overriding your hunger or suppressing your appetite. You're like, I'm going to bed hungry, so I'm winning. But eventually this becomes a output that is greater than your capacity. And that leads to collapse. That leads to burnout. It leads to exhaustion. It leads to not being able to sustain or maintain the thing that you're doing. So at some point, we need to evaluate, is this actually working for me? If you haven't even started your journey, do you even want to go down that path? And I think it's very important to honor where you're at. If what I'm saying about this is creating a lot of friction and resistance for you, maybe you're not ready for the thing that I'm offering. Maybe you need to go a different route first and have that experience. I'm a very big believer that the experiences we have in our body and the evidence that we can gather from that, or the insights that we can gather from the experiences we have in our body, should inform a lot of our decisions. So if you haven't had this experience and you don't quite believe what I'm saying, then maybe you have to go have that experience. I don't really want you to do that though, because it really sucks. So I would prefer that you don't need to go and have that experience, because it does suck. And that is kind of the whole point of this episode, is to help guide you towards a different experience, so you don't have to go through all of that and then go, oh, that didn't really feel good, and now I'm even further behind because my metabolism is trashed. And to be real, it can take several years to restore your metabolic health. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not even something that happens in a couple weeks. It can take time depending on where you're at and how depleted you are. So just keep that in mind. This whole thing of changing your body, of regenerative health, of vitality, this is not a quick fix. It is not a quick fix. You can get a lot done in a year, but give yourself time and give yourself grace, because we're in our bodies, and for all we know, we're going to be in these bodies for many, many decades. As far as I know, I'm going to be around until I'm 105. I don't know, right? So I want to set myself up for vitality, longevity, and a peaceful relationship with food and my body. And if it takes me more time to do that, but I gain more time in the long run from doing that, I am happy. If I get to wake up every day and not hate myself or struggle against myself or feel like I'm collapsing, I am happy. If every day I can feel expansion and energy and gladness and joy and curiosity and just frankly pure amazement at being alive in this beautiful world with all these beautiful things, that is amazing. And that is a perspective that I wear. It is how I look at things. It is what I choose to consume and how I choose to look at the world. So, as you can see, mindset is a huge piece of the puzzle. And weight loss is very nuanced. It is not a straight line. It is not linear. And if you're somebody who has always struggled with your weight or your body, it's even less of a straight line for you. There's a difference between somebody who gained some weight in college or what have you, and then they lost some weight. There's a difference between somebody who gained some weight in their 20s from drinking too many beers and then lost some weight, versus somebody who has struggled with obesity since childhood. Those are two different types of people, and I think it's very important to acknowledge that weight loss is not the same journey for everybody, and everyone has different levels of difficulty with it for different reasons. So let's just acknowledge that. Your journey might be very straightforward, and it also might be very cyclical and not very linear and frustrating. But if you're in it for the long game, you're going to feel a lot better by setting yourself up for a long-term, sustainable plan that supports your metabolism and your vitality. And again, I said earlier, what does weight loss even mean? What does that even mean to you? It's usually about a feeling. It's how I feel in my body. How do I feel about my self-image? Can I feel sexy? Can I feel confident? Do I feel good taking up space? Do I feel capable, powerful, energetic, vital. Sometimes it's about capacity and function. Are you functional? Do you feel like you can climb stairs? Go for a hike. Go for a run if you feel like it. Go for a swim. Sometimes there's functional aspects that we want. Sometimes it's just about how we feel in our bodies and about our self-image. Sometimes it's both. But like I said earlier, losing weight doesn't automatically mean that you will feel those things or be more functional. There are people who are underweight or quote unquote average weight and they're not functional. You can have somebody who's quote unquote skinny who can't climb a flight of stairs, and you can have someone who is quote unquote obese and they can. So as I said earlier, it's not about how your body looks, it's about how your body functions, and it's about your metabolic capacity and your body composition. You have to progressively work on it, starting where you are and adding more bit by bit. And fat loss fails when you try to do too much at once. The same with fitness or any big goal. You need to start small and match it to your actual real capacity. If you are a couch potato, cool. I love potato time, but be honest. Be honest with yourself. You will not go from being a couch potato to being at the gym 4 or 5 days a week without serious willpower. And eventually that willpower won't be enough if that routine feels exhausting or restricting or something that isn't giving you joy. You need to build your habits for life, not just for a week or a year or two. They need to be habits that you enjoy, because you're going to be doing them for the next several decades. Like I said, we're building habits to live into our hundreds. I want to be like 105. I don't know. Who cares? But don't look at your life in terms of the next year or the next 2 years. Look at it as a progression, a progressive overload through your life. You are going to build more on year by year by year by year. And the habits that you're building are going to carry you into old age. And so give yourself some grace if you're struggling. Give yourself some grace and permission to be where you are. If you need to slow down, if you need to do less, that is okay. I stopped going to the gym for years, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But here is the alternative path that I have been alluding to for the last 25 minutes. I hope you got several nuggets of wisdom in my speech, in my talk in the last 25 minutes. And if you are reorientating yourself and you're feeling like, yes, I want this change, but I don't want to fight my body. I don't want to cut calories or go a traditional route where I feel super restricted and depleted. Here is the number one thing for you to focus on. Number one, focus only on how you feel in your body and evaluate everything through that lens with curiosity and non-judgment. Be honest with yourself about how much energy you actually have. My path, I stopped going to the gym 2 years ago, like really stopped 2 years ago. In 2019, I had burnt out very badly. My health was very poor. I was very unwell. I was extremely unwell. And I focused in 2019, 2020 on healing my body. Like whatever I could do to heal my body, I did it. I quit being vegan and I got into pro-metabolic and animal-based eating and all the things. I talk about that in other episodes and other places. And then in 2023, I got into the job that I currently have, which is a high burnout job. I am a manager in a hotel restaurant, in a boutique hotel, very high reputation, all of these things. And I manage a team of people and, I deal with the public and all of these chaotic things that happen within a restaurant environment. And that is a high burnout job. And I'm doing it, like I said earlier in the episode, because we all got bills to pay. I live in an expensive city, and that's just the reality of my current season in life. And do I have goals for my future? Of course. Do I want to full-time work with women on their health? Yeah, absolutely. But it takes time to build that up, and I recognize that. So in 2023, I got into my high burnout job and I was working very hard and working a lot. And I recognized that my capacity for fitness was limited by my work, even though I really wanted to get back to it. But I was moving a lot through my day, getting like 10 to 12 to 15K steps a day within a building. And I recognized that my stress was very high and my cortisol was definitely playing a bit of a number on my body. And for the first year and a half of that job, I had a lot of collapsing on the couch and napping and exhaustion, and I was so tired. Instead of shaming myself about not being able to do more, about not going harder, about, I could be more disciplined, I can schedule this better, and my calendar is all like color coded and time blocked. You better believe me. I have a calendar. You better believe me. I'm pretty damn organized. But I just couldn't get myself to do more because I did not have the capacity for it. All my energy was maxed out. And at the time I also had clients that I was taking. So it was just a lot of things all at once. And instead of shaming myself or pushing myself to go harder or be more disciplined, I said, what do I actually have the capacity to control? If this is my life right now and I just know that I'm not going to be able to go to the gym and I'm not going to be able to live the ideal lifestyle that I want, what do I actually have the capacity to control? Number one, sleep. I can control sleep and I can control my sleep environment. Number two, nutrition. Nutrition and maintenance. Am I eating the right foods? Am I eating with a good pattern? What does that look like? If I can't eat for some reason, because if you know restaurants, sometimes you cannot eat when you're hungry, which is the exact opposite of what I teach. But I'm telling you, I'm a living embodiment of I know what it's like to be under high stress demands. So what happens when I can't eat? I make sure I'm fueling my cells with fresh orange juice or a spoonful of honey or something, to make sure I'm not crashing, to make sure that cortisol is not spiking, to make sure I'm not going into fight or flight mode because I'm very hungry, right? So there's always things that we can do to mitigate our situation, to mitigate the environment that we're in if it's not the environment we would choose to be in. And of course, there's a choice here. I chose to stay in the job and I chose to keep the job because the benefit of that outweighs the negative when I know I can manage that negative situation in such a way. So sleep, nutrition, eating at maintenance, eating enough, and then getting my daily movement. Like I said, I'm getting about 10 to 15K steps within my job. So I know that I'm moving my body. I know that I'm using my body. And those were the only things I'd focus on. If I had a little extra energy, I'd go for a longer walk after work. If I had a little extra energy, I would go for a hike on the weekend, things like that. And by resourcing my body in this way, by making sure I'm well resourced with sleep, nutrition, and just daily movement, not intentional movement, but I'm just moving throughout my day, that allowed my body to better adapt to the stress, because your body is always adapting and you can actually deal with a lot of stuff. You can deal with so much stuff, but you have to be adapted for it. You have to be well resourced for it. If you're not resourcing your body, you will collapse. And that was me early in this, where I was collapsing on the couch a lot. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this, right? I went from recovering from burnout and recovering from all this stuff for 4 years, and then suddenly going into this really high demand job where I didn't have that high demand for the previous 4 years. So it took some time for my body to adapt. And then finally, I went back to fitness in August of last year, 2025. And I went back to the gym, throwback to my powerlifting days, throwback to my heavy weightlifting. In October, I finally was like, I have the energy for this. I started with Mega Former Pilates basically in August, and that was enough to be, hey, I actually can go and work out after work and it's feeling pretty good. And maybe I have capacity for this. And that taught my nervous system that, yeah, you can do this actually. You actually do now at this point have capacity for that. Because I tried to go to the gym before and it would result in like absolute burnout, absolute crashing. It felt terrible in my body. It did not feel good. So I taught my nervous system by a gentle intro back into exercise, back into fitness by doing reformer Pilates. And I was like, oh, I think I can do this. So in October of 2025, I went back to the gym for heavy weightlifting because that is what I love best. And that is what I've been craving and what my nervous system has been craving. And I tested myself. I was expecting like, oh, I've probably lost a lot of strength. But I tested myself and I was only 30 pounds off of my previous heaviest deadlift, my previous personal best. I was only 30 pounds away from that. So in this time, I actually got stronger. But I didn't actually do anything like intentional to get stronger. I resourced my body. I moved my body and I got good sleep. That's all I did. Taking the time away from the gym didn't take anything away from me. It added space. So if you are on this journey and you want to lose weight or change your body or work on your body composition, here is the formula. Sleep is your first priority. Your circadian rhythm and your circadian alignment is the number one thing that you need to lock in. You need blackout curtains. I have 2 layers of blackout curtains in my bedroom. It should be so dark in your bedroom that you cannot see your hand in front of your face. You need that sleep. You need the melatonin. You need the cleanup processes that happen in your body when you're sleeping. You need the muscle building. You need the anti-inflammatory actions. All of that stuff that happens when you're asleep. Your body is so active when you're asleep, doing repair, doing cleanup. That is number 1. Number 2, nutrition. You need to set the stage for resourcing your body. You need to make sure that your cells have the things they need in order to fire, to create energy, to build, and to take care of your body. If your body's not well resourced by nutrition and sleep, then of course you're not going to have energy and you're not going to have vitality. And then daily movement keeps the body responding and remembering that muscle is needed. You don't need to be going and doing anything crazy. Just move your body. Like literally just go move your body. Go for a walk, take the stairs, get off a bus, stop early, carry your groceries a little bit further, challenge yourself when you're like, oh, I could do this or I could do this. Choose the thing that moves your body more. And just do that. And just do that for as long as you need to until you start having more energy. And then finally, at the end of all of that, when you have more energy and you're really good at those things, that's when you add in more. That is when you progressively overload your life, right? You've got the foundations, you got sleep, nutrition, movement. Now we're going to add a little bit more. We're going to overload a little bit more. We're going to add the gym or Pilates or swimming or hiking or whatever it is for you that feels like, oh, that would be fun. Okay. And instead of cutting back your calories, you're going to eat the same. You're going to eat in a way that your weight is not changing. If you're a woman, you're going to fluctuate 5 to 10 pounds with your cycle and salt and different things that are going on. But your weight is generally stable. You're generally averaging the same. And you're giving your body new inputs without taking anything away. And doing this allows your metabolism to stay online. We're going to start focusing on muscle mass at the end, right? When you're adding in that fitness, that's where we want to add in things that create more muscle demand, more strength. Can you do something a little harder, a little heavier? Can you carry more groceries in one hand? That's the challenge. This sets you up for a strong metabolic baseline. So then if you come into a situation where you do want to lose more fat after you've already gone on this whole process, if you need to reduce your caloric intake, you're not cutting from nothing. You're already at a great baseline. You're already eating enough. You're already maintaining. You're eating well. And your body is well resourced, so taking away isn't going to feel as drastic or as dramatic as it does when you're not well resourced. So again, in point form, here is the formula. Get your sleep right. Focus on proper nutrition. Eat at maintenance. You don't want to be eating not enough. You don't want to be eating too much. Just eat enough that your body maintains the same average weight. You want to keep your metabolism intact, build your capacity, integrate new habits, focus on muscle strength, density, and power. Then incorporate cardio for heart health. So you don't need to go on runs if you don't want to run, but you can go on walks, you can go on fast walks, you can go on a hike, a bike ride, swimming, dancing. There's so many things you can do for your cardiovascular health. And just repeat until the whole thing is second nature. Repeat until you crave movement. Repeat until you crave the stimulus of moving your body. Repeat until you crave the feeling of being able to move weight. Do it for a year, and then your body will change. And then, after you've done this for at least a year, you can evaluate, do I actually still need to lose weight? If you have over 50 pounds that you perceive that you need to lose, you might, but still follow this formula. If you have under 50 pounds that you feel you need to lose, you probably won't need to lose weight at the end of this because your body composition will change. Muscle weighs more than fat. If you just focus on this and you stop focusing on the quote-unquote weight that you need to lose, your body will change and you will feel better in your body. I can almost guarantee it. I'm so confident in this statement. So there's one other reason why this approach works really well, where other approaches fail, especially when we relate it to January and New Year's resolutions. And it's because January isn't a time for starting brand new habits, especially if you're running low or running on empty. As I've said multiple times, your goals need to match your capacity. And winter tends to be lower capacity and lower energy by design. If we think of our lives as a garden, what do you want to grow? Now is not the time for tilling soil. It's the time for choosing the seeds that we want to germinate and keeping them warm and watered so sprouts begin to grow as the light returns. And in spring, we turn the soil and put our seedlings into the earth. Growth abounds through spring and summer. And autumn is a time to slow down and turn inward again, a time to reflect and wrap up. December, we celebrate the year and the beginning of winter, where we then go into a dream state to figure out what seeds we want to grow, what do we want to tend, what do we want to prune, and then we do it again. Life is a continuation. It's a progression. It's not a start and stop. It's a cycle. Everything is always cycling, turning, and changing. And if you can get in the flow of that, if you can get comfortable with that, if you can recognize the season you're in and realize that it's a season and the season will change, if you can tend to the seedlings and saplings of your life and take care of them and keep them safe until they can be planted in fertile soil, then you will move through this progression beautifully. Time isn't a threat. And when we feel like we're out of time, our world shrinks and your metabolism actually slows down. When we think of time as expansive, the world opens, possibility blooms, and we have space for creation and energetic expansion. There's a whole physiological layer to time and metabolism. I do talk about it in another episode, which I will link below. I hope that you have found some nuggets in this conversation. I hope that you feel some comfort in moving at your own pace. And I hope you recognize that eating less and moving more should not be the priority. Sleeping more and eating well, maybe, should be the thing to focus on in this time of the new year. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.